Hi, my name's Gavin Bottrell and I run a company called Time Warp Golf. I've been doing Hickory Golf rental events for nearly 20 years in the UK, and I've sold clubs to people all over the world who want to play Hickory Golf. In this video I'll just be outlining a few things about what you might want to consider if you're buying your first set of golf clubs, Hickory Golf Clubs. Okay. So let's just talk bags first of all. So this is a newly made leather bag, but in an old style. So one pocket like this, strap, about 6 inches in diameter. And a leather bag like this, it will last a very long time if you look after it. And I guess I would always recommend somebody perhaps to go for something like this with their first set. But as an alternative, you could go to a newly made bag like this, which is canvas and leather, and these are a little bit lighter. So if carrying weight is a factor for you, then you might want to consider a bag like this. Alternatively, you could, if you can find one, go for a vintage bag, and you can find all leather vintage bags, or you can go for something like this, which is canvas and leather again. The thing to look out for if you're looking at a vintage bag is particularly the top and bottom bits of the strap. Leather, because it's tanned, will actually rot over many decades, to the point where the leather looks okay, but as soon as it's got some load on it, it can break very easily. Okay, so that's bags. So what do you need to play Hickory Golf? Well, you don't need that many clubs, really. I guess this is what I'd call a basic set, which is a brassy wood. So something perhaps with 12 degrees up to 14 degrees of loft. So you can both use it off the tee and off the fairway. And it has a brass sole plate on it, typically looking like that. And then you need 4 irons, and they have names, of which the longest one is called a mid iron, which is about a modern 5. Then you have a mashie, which is like a modern 7, a mashie niblick, which is like a modern 9, and niblick, which is usually about a modern gap wedge. And then a putter. Now there's lots of different types of putters. You can go for a metal blade like this. This is actually a putting cleek, so it has about 12 degrees of loft. Or you can go for something like this, which is an aluminium headed putter. You see quite a lot of these around. They tend to have less loft, so they're more suited to modern greens. And they're good for obviously playing off, nearer the hole, whereas putting cleeks, you can actually use them off the green a bit to sort of get it moving onto the green. Okay, so that's a basic set. The thing to decide when you're selecting some clubs or trying to build up your first set, the first thing is whether you're going to go for mild steel heads, which will pick up surface rust if they get damp and wet, or stainless steel. So I'll just get out a couple here to make that absolutely clear. Okay, so here's 2 I think these are both mid irons. Okay, so this mild steel, you can see it's sort of a dark grey, mottled grey that's been polished to look like this. Sometimes when you find these, they'll be really dark, rusty. And this is stainless steel. Now, a lot of people who aren't going to want to clean their clubs will go for stainless steel. That is, clean them too often. But if you're a bit more of a purist, you can happily play with mild steel. Now the thing also to mention is some clubs like this actually have a smooth face, so they're a little bit earlier in time, perhaps before 1910, whereas ones like this have a pattern face, and this one happens to have horizontal sort of dashes. You can get ones with complete horizontal grooves like modern irons, or you can get ones, let's see if I've just got one handy, that have dots. I can't really find one. There's a sort of one with more spaced out dashes. See if I can find a dot one very quickly. There's a dot one in this bag of left-handed clubs. So they're quite widely spaced dots on this one, but you can get quite closely spaced dots. Okay, so in terms of if you're buying to a budget, really it's going to be more the mild steel clubs, the headed clubs that are going to fit your budget. But what is really, really important when it comes to Hickory Golf Clubs is the shaft. There's quite a large selection of clubs out there on the open market, but if you're wanting clubs to play with, whether it's once, twice a year or every week, you've got to pay attention to the shafts. And you will find that a large number of clubs out there don't have shafts that are strong enough for playing with. One thing to look for if you are just out and about and you see a club, well, you tend to find they'll have splits round about here as the club actually flexes into impact. You get stress fractures just about here. You also get sometimes quite a lot of movement between the head and the shaft. It can pivot on the hosel pin, which is just about here. If you've got a club that has got movement between the head and the shaft, you've really got to have it repinned, reglued. Otherwise, you're just asking for trouble. So it could be actually quite a good shaft, but if over the years it's just become a little loose, what happens is actually the wood tends to shrink a little bit. It just needs repinning, and then it actually might go on and be perfectly good. So don't discount a shaft just because it is loose. It might just be that the interaction with the head is just not what it should be. So when I do up clubs for play, the first thing I look at is actually I'm looking at the head quite closely. Again, I'm looking for stress fractures in the hosel. Sometimes you get them just down here. You get tiny little lines, but that's not that common, but it does happen. So I'm looking at the head. I'm looking at the interaction between the head and the shaft and whether it needs repinning. And in fact, I think on one of my videos, I give some tips on how to go about repinning a head. Then I'm looking at the shaft. I'm looking whether it's quite stiff or whether it's excessively bendy and too soft. It's hard to judge sometimes whether a shaft has become soft with age or indeed whether it was made like that. And I'm pretty sure some of them were actually made quite soft or very flexible to our modern sensibilities, particularly if they might have been made for people with slower swing speeds. For example, you tend to want a more flexible shaft. This particular shaft in this mashie is really quite stiff. And another thing to look out for is if you bend a shaft, does it actually move back into a straight line, or does it actually retain the bend, retain the set? Some shafts, if you bend them, and I'm talking about you actually have to put them over your knee and put some force, and if they retain their flex, that's normally not a good sign. but sometimes I have had shafts that will retain their bend, but actually they're actually quite strong, so it's just literally a case of bending them straight again. It's no really big deal. Okay, so things like grips can be easily redone, and again on one of my videos I've talked through how to re-grip from start to finish, whether you go for a suede side facing outwards grip or something more with the hard side of the leather outwards, or you can go for modern produced leather wrapped grips that have beveled edges, so when you wrap them on you effectively get a small valley between the sort of wrappings. I'm sure people who have seen old golf clubs will be quite familiar with that, and they're very nice to use. So the thing that you have to also bear in mind is, if you're building up a set for play, is are they actually fitted to you? Now you might already have modern clubs that have been fitted to you, or you might have always played with clubs that are off the shelf. Well, I have to say I would strongly recommend that if you're taking up hickory, you've got to actually have a set that is reasonably fitted to you in terms of lie angles particularly. So this is this angle here, not the loft. So you do see, and I do see, a lot of old hickories with either very, very flat lie angles, so they were made for someone that wasn't that tall. Very rarely do you see hickories with very, very upright loft angle lie angles, and that's probably as a lot of people do know, actually certainly in the UK 100 years ago men were on average 2 inches shorter than they are today. So it's quite important that if you buy a club, whether you buy, I sell clubs, whether you buy it from me, I'll always say to you, okay, well, tell me how tall you are, and we can go into more details about that when we talk. Or you take it to your nearest golf professional and say, could you actually just bend this to what you think is the right lie angle for me? And any competent professional should be able to figure that out. A word of caution: mild steel irons will bend very, very easily. Stainless steel irons don't. It's the simplest way to put it. It can happen that you can have a lovely stainless steel iron, and it's happened to me, and I've gone to bend it and actually it shears clean off here at the hosel, so the steel is too brittle to actually be bent. So that's just a little word of caution. Okay, so I've covered okay, we've talked about irons quite a bit. Next, coming to woods. So the set I originally showed had only one wood, a brassy wood of about 12 degrees. Certainly you can buy woods that are more, or should I say, that are drivers. And if I can just, I don't know whether I've actually, believe it or not, okay. So here's an early driver. It's actually got a scared neck, but I won't talk about that. So how can you tell what you've got? Well, drivers have usually just a horn insert on the leading edge. And I've seen hickory drivers with as little as 7 degrees loft going up to 13 degrees loft. So you need to select a driver that actually is suitable for the game you want to play. And I should say that having a little bit more loft than perhaps with your modern driver is a good thing when it comes to hickory golf. So don't be afraid. If you normally play with a 9-degree driver, certainly going to an 11-degree driver with hickory is sure you won't hit it as far, I would guess, but you will hit it straighter, and loft is your friend. So that's driver. Then middle of the wood selection, you have a brassy, and in fact this one helpfully says brassy on the sole plate, and that one, as I've written on that, so that has a loft actually of 12 degrees, so not a lot for a brassy. Brassies can range from 10 degrees right up to 25 degrees, which I'll come to in a minute. So again, one thing to say is swing weights. This one I've written on here on a little piece of tape. This has a swing weight of C0. Now, most modern clubs have swing weights round about D2 on the logarithmic scale. What does that mean? Okay, so this, if you're not familiar with swing weights, this is going to feel lighter when you swing it. It's going to be easier to move the mass of this club head, but you're not going to have as much momentum behind it when it hits the ball, so theoretically it doesn't go as far. The thing to say about Hickory Golf is actually having swing weights that are a little bit lighter, that are in the C range, is no bad thing. Even if your modern clubs are D2 or even D4 or even D6. I've had a lot of people come to me over the years. We've gone to my local golf range or practice ground, and I've handed them a club which I know is, let's say, C2. And they start hitting it wonderfully, and then I say to them, what swing weight do you think that is? And when I say and tell them that it's C2, they're very, very surprised, but hopefully pleasantly surprised. Okay, so and this one is C0, in fact. So there we are. Okay, the most lofted woods tend to be called spoons. And spoons do range in terms of loft from anything from about 14 degrees up to, I've seen spoons actually as much as 30 degrees. Now this one is what a lot of people call a bulldog wood, because it has a little cuppy sole. This isn't as cupped as some I've seen. This probably has about 21 degrees of loft. And they're great for playing off either very lush fairways or just slightly off the fairway. So it's a great sort of trouble wood for getting out. So if you wanted to build a full set, it's a driver, a brassy, a spoon. Then usually you'd go to a mid-iron, like a modern 5, a mashie modern 7, a mashie niblick a modern 9, a niblick, a modern gap wedge, and again you could alter the lofts on your shortest wedges, or have 2 wedges and then a putter. In as well as that, you could also squeeze in a club called a jigger. I think I've got a jigger here. Now jiggers tend to come in at about a modern 6-iron loft, but they tend to have shallower faces and longer shafts, so they're really for playing more lofted, longer shots. So that's a great addition, and what happened over the years was people tended to grip right down on them and use them for little chip shots, and so jiggers tend to be known to modern players as something that you play chip shots with, but actually 100 and odd years ago they were actually a long range club. So that's a jigger. Equally, you could put in more longer irons. You could have a driving iron. You see some irons called driving irons which have about 21, 22 degrees of loft. Or you could have a cleek, which is historically the longest iron, and they are around about 18, 19, 20 degrees. But you've got to be quite a skillful golfer to successfully hit a cleek. Okay, so I hope that helps. Please have a look at the other videos I've put on this channel, and if you have any questions, please drop me an email to info@timewarpgolf.com or put it in the comments below. And thanks for watching. Bye.